as host. We're also having a journalist following us remotely, so we'll take some questions there. We have translation in French, English and Slovenian, mind you. And I give the floor now to the President of the European Council.
Merci beaucoup. Bonjour à chacune et à chacun d'entre vous. Et je souhaite naturellement commencer par remercier très chaleureusement, au nom de l'ensemble des collègues et des États membres et des délégations, Janez Janša et la présidence slovénienne pour l'organisation et la facilitation de cette Among the 27 member states, on a regular basis, we have discussions, we have political debates on those topics in order to see how we can achieve more progress, in order to make sure that we all follow, that we all respect those fundamental principles. This one first point, and this is key because this is also the choice that we want for the European member states, but also the choice that the governments in those countries, the Western Balkans, they want for their societies. This is the first point. The second point, this is key, this is paramount, this is the link between the reforms that are needed, and we would like to encourage, this was our common message, the reforms in those countries, and the investments. And here the Commission took very fundamental decisions by providing a lot of money, an unprecedented amount of money, in order to connect the Western Balkans on the EU priorities, in order also to facilitate, to encourage the regional cooperation in this region, which is also key for the future. And you know what are our common priorities, the Green Deal, but also the digital agenda. And we hope that those investments will play an important role also in order to make the European presence, the EU's presence, more visible, more tangible for the people in those countries, so they can feel, they can see what are the concrete benefits coming from this partnership, this strong partnership with the EU. Le troisième point que je souhaiterais mettre en évidence, parce que
the third point that I'd like to underscore, and that emerged from our lively, passionate debate, which was an opportunity for us to speak face to face on the issues, the conflicts which have been left over by our history, by the past, which are linked to questions around minorities and their treatment in different countries. We had a broad discussion on that, and we were able to say that we wanted to see progress made. We are willing to bear our share of the responsibility by encouraging and facilitating the different stakeholders to act responsibly, but we need political decisions in these countries to make progress. Finally, a fourth point which I would highlight, in all frankness, you know this and it's not a secret, there is an ongoing discussion among the 27 about our capacity to take on new members. On this subject, it's clear that we still need to make some progress. There are some debates happening within the framework of the Conference on the Future of Europe. We have to decide what we want to do together as a European Union in the future, how we want to take decisions together. Again, on that, progress will be indispensable. So as you can see, there are a number of topics which have now been clearly identified through the various political interventions and on which we now have to work to make progress. Today's declaration is substantial, dense. It sets out a lot of tangible, concrete issues around our relationships. It has been now validated by all of the leaders, and we have to remain politically engaged. One brief final point. We had an informal dinner yesterday evening. I drew up oral conclusions at the end, which were given to you on paper, to set out the nature of our debate. I might just add one point. There is a will for Europe to remain engaged in the process, to continue to grow its influence in the world, in line with our values, working with our partners, and in particular our allies, which, as I said yesterday and would repeat today, it's not a question for us of either NATO or European defence. We want a strong European Union, including in matters of defence. A strong European Union in defence is in itself a way of bolstering our alliances and strengthening our alliances. I think that's very much the guiding line from yesterday's debate, which was also rich in arguments and ideas. That is very much the value of Europe, the richness of shared ideas which all go into building European unity, which is the most important, most solid basis to defend our interests and values. Thank you.
President, please.
Thank you so much. First of all, let me also congratulate Prime Minister Janše for this successful summit, and thank you very much for the outstanding organization and hospitality we've had here. Let me reflect on the Western Balkan summit first. The Commission's message is very clear. First of all, the Western Balkan is part of the same Europe as the European Union. We share the same history, we share the same interests, the same values, and I'm deeply convinced also the same destiny. And the European Union is not complete without the Western Balkans. So my Commission will continue to do its utmost to advance the enlargement process and the region's EU integration. We want the Western Balkans in the European Union. There cannot be any doubt that our goal is enlargement. And my second message today was that the economic and investment plan is at the core of our engagement with the region. Indeed, with 9 billion euros put on the table in grants, we can leverage up to 30 billion euros for the region. The economic and investment plan is accompanied by the Berlin process, and it is crucial for the development and the deeper integration of the common regional market. The market integration will be as beneficial to the Western Balkans as the single market is to the European Union. Therefore, our focus is now on developing this common regional market. Last week, I was traveling to the 6 Western Balkan countries, and besides the discussions on the topics I was just mentioning, I also felt people's impatience and partly their frustration over the length of the process to join the European Union. And I understand that. So what is the way forward based on this? On the issues of reform, it is clear that our partners in the Western Balkans are undertaking important reforms. I'm not saying that they are there yet, but there is obvious a lot of progress visible. If you look over time, a lot has changed to the better. And now it is important to stay the course in key areas such as justice, the fight against corruption, organized crime, media freedom and economic reforms. But in the meantime, the European Union also has to deliver. And in particular, the lack of a decision for opening the negotiations with North Macedonia and Albania is jeopardizing our standing and our leverage in the region. Therefore, it was very important today, throughout the course of the day, to move forward on this process, to clarify this process. There is an intensive work being done by the Commission to really find the key issues in the bilateral topics between Bulgaria and North Macedonia. It's 5+1 issue, and to make sure that we get it into a roadmap so that there's a very practical step forwards to solve problems. We've been discussing at the summit that the dialogue, the willingness to solve problems and the capability to address difficult and problematic issues is the core of what the European Union is all about. If you look at our more than 70 years of history, that's how we built the European Union, and therefore I'm very confident that we are able to solve these issues. Important is also the practical work on the ground. For example, if we look at overcoming the pandemic, we have provided 3.3 billion euros to the region to address the emergency of the crisis. We've donated 2.9 million doses of vaccines, and we have proven that we were the Western Balkans' most reliable partner in this crisis, and we will continue being the closest partners in years and decades to come. And as I've said, we've put 9 billion euros on the table for the economic and investment plan. This could be a game changer. To give you very practical examples, for example, to have Serbia help improve the wastewater management so that the Danube can be clean right down to the Black Sea. Or we discussed with Bosnia and Herzegovina the fact that they want to phase out its coal-powered power plants and replace them by clean alternatives. This could be part of the investment or improvement to rail and road connections across the region, thus also linking better Greece to the rest of the European Union, just to name a few of the topics. We prepared an action plan for the Western Balkan Green Agenda. We are launching an innovation agenda to help promote innovation in the area, and we agreed on a roadmap to reduce roaming charges between the European Union and the Western Balkans. Finally, last week's agreement between Kosovo and Serbia on the tensions over the license plate, an agreement that was facilitated by the European Union, was an excellent message also to the region, that it is possible. We're sitting down at the negotiation table, we're showing the willingness to find solutions, that even in very difficult situations we are able to find those solutions and to move forward. And I think if we look at our declaration today, it is a very clear statement that our commitment to enlargement is in the very first paragraph that shows our willingness here to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Prime Minister, please.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the President of the European Council, Charles Michel, for organizing this informal European summit here in Slovenia. This is a very important event about what the situation in the region is. I would also like to thank Ursula for all of the efforts by her and her team regarding the solving of certain specific issues that need to be resolved before we can start discussing the continuation of the enlargement process. We are very pleased that we were able to host this summit with all stakeholders in a time of a pandemic. So this was a relief for us because via video conferences everything cannot be solved. Sometimes physical contacts are necessary. Let me add some points to what both presidents have already stated. This informal EU Western Balkans Summit is regarding the European perspective of the region after the Thessaloniki process in 2003, when the region was informed that it does have a European perspective. So this is a milestone summit today. Why? Not only because of the event itself, but also because of the many processes that were running in parallel and enabled today's discussion for the enlargement to be a strategic answer to strategic challenges. Here I'm talking about Germany's efforts within the Berlin process, regarding Slovenia and Croatia's efforts at the Brdo process, Brioni process, etc. Also engagements of the Western Balkans itself within the region. They try to create bonds which ease their path into the European Union. And also, let me not forget about the efforts of the European Commission regarding the enlargement. It is clear that the European Union, with its specific steps, is proving that Western Balkans is in the context of the Thessaloniki decision. That was a time when the tragic consequences of the 90s in the Balkans, after many atrocities that happened, and that's when these tragic things were in the air, and the decision in Thessaloniki was very important for stability of the region. Everyone perhaps felt that it would happen before, even before today's summit. But many crises followed after that decision, also in the EU itself, which of course meant delays. We've agreed a declaration at this summit which includes many positive statements for the region. The 30 billion, which is very important, and the promise, almost a promise of abolishing roaming charges for the region. Let me also mention all the incentives that both presidents have mentioned at the beginning, regarding also the reforms that the countries in Western Balkans will have to carry out, not only because with a view to membership, but because they have to modernize their systems. It is no secret that during the discussion on the Brdo Declaration, Slovenia also wanted to mention a timetable for enlargement. This timetable is now not part of the declaration, but we had a broad discussion about it, and I think that most EU member states have expressed the readiness, the will that we will in the next decade focus on this European perspective for the region. Since the Thessaloniki decision in 2003, since this historic decision, there is no more equation anymore between the European perspective and membership in the EU. The European perspective of countries on the European continent stays, but this started to separate, and that is why it is important for us that we do mention enlargement, and this is a huge incentive for candidate countries and everyone else in the Western Balkans. After today's debate and yesterday's debate, and there were also many bilaterals, thank you to both presidents for all of your efforts during the past weeks and days regarding specific issues which needed to be resolved in order for the processes to continue. After the debate, one thing is clear. if we want this European perspective to materialize, if we want that this is tangible for citizens and an incentive to reform, then the three processes in the next decade will have to run in parallel. First, the European institutions will need to also follow through certain processes so that it will be efficient if enlarged. Then open issues will have to be resolved, for example, between Serbia and Kosovo and North Macedonia and Bulgaria. But in parallel, the negotiating process should also go on. We believe that negotiations do not only allow for, but make the resolving of these bilateral issues easier. This is different if we have a negotiating process as opposed to only resolving bilateral issues or registration plates or a certain article in a certain agreement, etc. The enlargement framework has to be above it, within which specific issues are resolved. If this is not so, then every week we will be faced with a different issue, and these will only be short-term solutions. We firmly believe that in the next decade, these three processes should run in parallel. After all, this is what the European Union committed itself to do in 2003. And back then, this was clear. There is no other good perspective for the region. If this perspective is ensured, it's good, and if it isn't, certain tragic events from history could be repeated, and I don't think anyone wishes to see that. I hope that our future steps will be more resolved and adamant than in the past decade.
We'll take a few questions first in the room here. Martin Dunay from the Financial Times, please. Martin, please come to the stand. You need a microphone.
Yes, thank you. Martin Dunay from the Financial Times. Prime Minister Janše touched upon this. I wanted to ask that the date, the 2030 date, or any date indeed, is conspicuously missing from this declaration. I understand that you have this urgency to act in the interest of enlargement, but what is your sense? What kind of credibility does this have? It's a long declaration, but what kind of actual specific hope can this give to the citizens of the region to actually be committed to the reforms on their side to complete the process? And I was going to limit myself to this, but energy prices being where they are today, gas prices at a record level, I have to ask about that too. The emissions trading system also obviously is affected. So, energy market reform seems inevitable. A lot of leaders are really expecting the EU to step up and act decisively on this. What do you think the European Union can do, either on the Commission or the Council level? Thank you very much.
First question, I can guarantee you that the talks we had this morning and this afternoon were very useful because we feel the importance to act, and that's why we have clarified what are the common priorities, and I've explained at the beginning values, reforms, investment, and also the important topic of disputes. And we were very active the last hours, the last days, in order to help, to provide support, to facilitate all the efforts that are needed in order to make progress. But there is something something very interesting. Yesterday we had this informal dinner on the geopolitical role of the EU. And today we had this Western Balkan Summit. These are concrete examples. It shows if we want to be more efficient, if we want to be more decisive, that we need also to take into account the situation in this region and to see how we can deliver more concrete results. And you are right, this is a long declaration because this is a declaration with a lot of concrete commitments, concrete engagements, and now we will implement with our partners. We have our homework and they have their homework and we'll cooperate, we'll coordinate. Point one. Point two, the energy prices, and especially the situation of gas. I had the opportunity last week to communicate on this topic and to explain that I intended, after consultation with the Member States, to put this topic on the agenda for the next European Council in Brussels, the 21st and the 22nd of October. And yesterday, two members of the European Council took the floor in order to open the discussions on this topic, knowing that what we want, this is a serious preparation in order to be able, during the next European Council, to give some orientations. And we will count on the support, the important support by the Commission, because this is also not a secret, and probably Ursula will say more about that, but the Commission intends to publish a communication, which will be the foundation, the basis, in order to make sure that all the leaders will have the same level of understanding, the same starting point, the same level of information, and so we can make progress together in order to address this important question at the national level, because the energy mix is a national responsibility of the Member States, but maybe, and probably, this is what I hope, there is also political space in order to try to follow a more common European approach on this important topic.
Yes. So to your first question, what makes you, my words, so confident for the Western Balkan enlargement process? Two things of today. First of all, listening to the debate and the comments of the leaders, a vast majority has expressed their support for the enlargement process, mainly also looking at now stepping forward with Albania and North Macedonia. Even the more sceptical ones, and this is a very clear sign. I'm aware of the fact that we still have to solve the issues, bilateral issues between Bulgaria and North Macedonia. Here I'm confident that we will find solutions, but the strong support overall was important. And my second point is the fact that we are investing 30 billion euros in the region speaks for itself. We're deeply convinced that this is not only for the benefit of the Western Balkan, but also for the benefit of the European Union, and that it will smoothen the path towards enlargement. What energy is concerned, first of all, to clarify one thing, it is indeed the high energy prices are mainly resulting from skyrocketing gas prices. And if you look at the renewables, they have been stable in the price and they've dropped over the last years in the price. So it's very clear that our future is the renewables and certainly not over time gas, also because of the dependency we have with gas. 90% of the gas we use is being imported. So it's very clear where the future for us lies. Indeed, in the short term, it's mostly national tasks to fulfill. We will have a communication with the Commission next Wednesday at the College of the Commissioners in preparation then for the structured debate in the Council, so that we look at the national measures that are possible, but that we also look at medium and long-term possible action on the European level.
If you'll allow me briefly on the timeline. Slovenia did not foresee to put in a binding date, i.e. that by 2030 all Western Balkan states become European member states. That is not something that we can demand. It is clear that this depends on a debate. We think, however, that you can foresee certain clear steps and that we could envisage these in the next decades. We have some experience regarding this due to the great enlargement process in 2004. At that time, there was a timeline available on individual steps. For those who are conducting negotiations, it's very important to know by when what is expected, by when certain reforms should be implemented. And then this also ensures greater support for reform processes. The first steps towards defining enlargement as a strategic priority and would be to set a timeline. And we made such a step during the adoption of the Thessaloniki statement, because we mentioned the European perspective for countries in Europe. On energy prices, we see that the effect is asymmetric. Countries have concluded different contracts with energy suppliers. The price hike will have a symmetrical effect on the European Union next year, however, so everyone will feel the consequences of this. So this is a timely debate, and I think that we will follow the situation and that we will tackle this issue at the next two summit sessions. In 2008 and in 2009, we saw the beginnings of an economic crisis. And at that time, we also saw the prices of energy rise. And this had an effect on practically all economic sectors. This was followed by a long period of recession for many countries. The situation is a bit different now, however, but we must take these warning signs seriously. We are aware of these issues. This was clear in the debates yesterday. It's clear that measures are being prepared. They will be adopted in a timely fashion so that this will not take away from the resilience and recovery aspirations. Thank you.
Helena Milinkovic from the National Radio and TV here in Slovenia. Please, Helena.
Hello, Helena Milinkovic, Slovenian Public Television.
One of the important conditions for the enlargement of the EU to Western Balkans is the respect of the rule of law and the main values and principles of the European Union and democratic standards, which is also the plurality of media. Today we are meeting here in Slovenia, and it is the 275th day since the Slovenian press agency has not got payments, and it's been a few days since the president has resigned. What does the European Union send as a message to Western Balkans now? Because Slovenia in this regard is problematic regarding the respect of rule of law. Also a question for our Prime Minister. When will the government respect its duties vis-à-vis the Slovene press agency? Namely, in 2 weeks, the press agency could go into bankruptcy. So the situation is very, very dire. We would also like to know what the European Commission will do concretely in this case, because the messages of support are not enough. Slovenia is not the only country where the rule of law and democracy are being undermined. There are other member states in this regard, and I believe that the Western Balkans countries perhaps see that these commitments are not truthful. Let me first mention the concrete answer regarding the payment to the press agency. It will be done at the same day when the director signs the agreement. We cannot do it before. These are political reasons, but as soon as the director gives a green light, signs the agreement, then we can pay out these funds. I hope it will be resolved quickly.
Question is for Léa Marchal, Agence Europe. Léa.
They would like. No, we will answer.
Okay.
No, just a few points. I would like to reiterate that, of course, the freedom of press is an important European value. This is one first point. And second point, we have put some mechanism in place in order to strengthen the European rule of law, in order to promote our fundamental values, in order to promote the governance. We had last year, when we decided on the next European budget and the recovery fund, important talks in order to put in place a new mechanism. This mechanism will be fully operational very soon, and it shows the importance for the European Council, I'm certain also for the Commission as guardian of the treaties, to make sure that the existing mechanism and the future mechanism that will be put in place can be used with respect for the different opinions, in order to make sure that the EU institutions are able to play their role in order to promote those fundamental values.
Yes, what the lack of financing of the STA is concerned, we have repeatedly expressed our serious concerns as regards of the lack of this financing of the Slovenian press agency, because this is the funding, the ongoing funding is important for its independence. Last week, Vice President Jourova has sent a letter to the Slovenian authorities stressing the urgency of the situation and reminding the obligations of the government. This has recently been confirmed by the Slovenian Supreme Court, and I think overall it shows once again the need for EU legislation to protect media freedom and pluralism via the Media Freedom Act that I have announced in the State of the Union, because I'm deeply convinced defending media freedom means defending our democracy, and media companies cannot be treated like any other business, because their independence is so crucial for the democracies and the reporting behind it. I wanted to add one point, if I may, to the energy topic. I think it is important that we keep in mind that the spike of energy prices is a global phenomenon. It's not limited to the European Union. It's a global phenomenon. We should also keep in mind that last year, because of the pandemic, the energy prices have been much lower than normally. So right now, this is also a rebound because of the picking up of the economy. And thus, we have to treat the short-term effects. But over the long term, we also have to deal with the fact that the storage at the moment is limited. So it's also a question of storage for the European Union.
Thank you, Madam President. We have Léa Marchal, Agence Europe.
If you'll allow me, I would like to ask something regarding the first question on the National Press Agency. We have a national law on our press agency which defines how this agency is financed, and the decision of the court was not such as Commissioner Jourova thinks it to be. These are internal games played against the government. We face claims that the director of the National Press Agency was appointed due to political connections 10 years ago, but now we see that the National Press Agency has a very responsible role to play. Regarding decisions on enlargement, Slovenia will demand from all joining member states to take into account a rule of law so that they do not imprison opposition members, that they are not to be threatened, and that persons who have conducted heinous crimes during the communist regime are to be sanctioned appropriately.
Excuse me, we'll take another question here. Please let us conduct this press conference in an orderly fashion. Léa, à vous.
Bonjour, merci. Une question en français sur le...
A question in French on the informal dinner yesterday concerning strategic autonomy. Could you give us a little bit more detail as to how you see one strengthening Europe's strategic autonomy without that being in opposition to the United States? The EU has wanted to renew its links with the United States and at the same time to achieve greater strategic autonomy. So how far would this actually go in terms of the EU's strategic autonomy? And I'd also like to ask, to what extent do you want to strengthen relations with the United States above and beyond the Council for Technology? Let me try to be summary in my reply. In the EU, we have been talking for some time now about the concept of strategic autonomy. It's an important term in its own right. Strategic autonomy can lead perhaps to misunderstandings in some cases. And I think one of the purposes of the informal dinner yesterday was to frankly discuss this and try to overcome, correct any misunderstandings or ambiguities. Many colleagues support this concept. Some feel that one should refer to open strategic autonomy to show that it's fully in line with the EU's support for the multilateral process and to keep the European Union open to the rest of the world. This may go without saying, but it doesn't do any harm to repeat it, firstly. Secondly, there is clear insight following our discussion yesterday evening on the substance of this debate. Our heads of state and government are very close to each other. We believe that we have to work in particular in two main fields, I'll come back to those, to strengthen our achievements, to focus our efforts, and to reduce any outstanding divergences. So what are these two key aspects? You won't be surprised. Firstly, to continue working towards economic development and social cohesion in Europe. And in this respect, we have a very clear agenda, which existed already before COVID, the Green Deal, the digital revolution. These are two major transformative processes on which the European Union wants to play a leading role on the international stage. That is true in particular in the climate sector, that goes without saying, but we also want to work in the digital sector to make real progress there and to reduce the level of vulnerabilities or fragility. We see with the case of microchips that there is a certain vulnerability there, and we have been working to overcome these shortcomings. And secondly, on economic issues, the internal market, technological innovation, digital transformation, which have a key leverage role to play in terms of ensuring the EU's development in the future. Second element, security and defense, European security and defense. Let's avoid any possible misunderstandings. We're all fully convinced, and that is something which all the speakers made yesterday. Europe is has to be a security pillar. We all feel the need to deepen our cooperation in this field. We also need to be clear about the possible methods we can best adopt, and that's why we have the concept of the compass, the strategic compass. Josep Borrell has already presented a first draft in November, and we will continue to discuss this matter, including on issues of security and defense, and perhaps in March, very probably, we will have a council on this very issue. And then there is the EU-NATO declaration. We've been working with the member states to prepare this joint declaration with NATO, which shows our commitment to working with NATO and vice versa. And in the run-up to the NATO summit in June in Spain, we want to be able to come forward with this declaration. So what we've been seeing in recent times is we have been facing geostrategic, geopolitical problems that have arisen, developments. We need to see how best we can take these on board. Our allies, our strong allies mean strong alliances, and we've seen the last statement by the US president on this very issue. It's pointing very much in the same direction. He was saying that where the European Union strengthens its defense dimension, this strengthens NATO, and this is an area which does need further clarification. This will continue among the EU member states and with our allies elsewhere.
Yesterday, it was very interesting to see that we should also speak about our strength. We are the world's biggest trading bloc. We are front runners. If you look at the answer, how to fight climate change, we are setting norms and standards in the digital world through our human-centric legislation. And we are the region that has shipped the most doses of a vaccine to the neighborhood. We have exported more than 800 million doses of vaccines to more than 130 countries, not to speak of the on top 500 million doses of vaccines that have been pledged as donation. So sometimes it's also good to recall what we are doing. And what the relation with the United States is concerned, I had a phone call with President Biden on Monday evening, and it was reaffirming, for example, our vaccine partnership between the European Union and the United States to vaccinate the world. It's not only the export, it's not only the donation, but it's also creating manufacturing hubs in different regions than the highly industrialized countries. It was about joining forces before COP26 to have a strong answer to the problems of climate change, mainly also to join forces on climate finance for the developing countries. It was also about the Trade and Technology Council that took place for the first time and was a big success and a big step forward in this common agenda. And, of course, we discussed in this phone call the topic of defense in the light of the issues around AUKUS. And here, I think it is important, also yesterday evening in the discussion, very clear confirmation NATO is the strongest military alliance in the world, and the European Union will never be a military alliance. But there are scenarios where we do not see NATO, but it might be necessary for the European Union to be able to act. And therefore, it is a lot about improving our capabilities as European Union. It is also a question of interoperability and a question of strengthening our industrial basis and to adapt our capabilities to the new threats. And here it's mainly the cyber topic. So what is also clear, all these efforts that we are pursuing now and building towards the Defence Summit next year are complementary to NATO, but they give the European Union the capability to act if the political will is there to engage.
If you'll
allow me, I would highlight some of the things we've heard. It's not a case of either or. It's about both elements. The debate has clearly reaffirmed that we need NATO as the security organization that ensured peace during the Cold War. That it remains relevant even nowadays during these uncertain modern times. We heard that this alliance is of benefit to the entire European Union, even though not all member states of the EU are members of NATO. This alliance is of benefit to those member states that are not formal members of NATO. We need to strengthen European capabilities as well. If we take into account all budgets for defense at the level of the EU, the total sum is 5 times that of the total defense budget of Russia or of China. But we are facing problems in the field of interoperability. We do not have an agreement on closer cooperation, on creating European defense capabilities. Given the situation in our neighborhood and in the Pacific, it is clear that we cannot automatically count on the help of the USA. So this would be a case of and. It's not a case of and or. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll take a question remotely. David Carretta. J'espère que vous êtes encore avec nous.
Et oui. Merci beaucoup, David.
Yes, thank you very much. Radio Radicale, Italian radio station. My first question is for President Mišela concerning the debate yesterday on strategic autonomy. As I understand it, in philosophical and political terms, one can see where the debate is pointing, but I just wanted to ask you whether the 27 are clear and agreed as to what the main goals of this strategic autonomy should be. What are the key points that need to be promoted? Let's take a specific example, if I may. Microchips. There's a Chinese potential threat to Taiwan. What is the EU's interest going to be should there be Chinese aggression in the Sea of Taiwan?
And von der Leyen on the issue of enlargement, I'm sure you have read or heard about an article by Politico on your commissioner for enlargement, who allegedly pushed for Serbia in the process and is putting rule of law and human rights issue under the carpet. I'm wondering if you have any reaction on that, and if Commissioner Varela has your confidence, full confidence. Thank you.
Sur votre première question.
On the first question, this was the heart of the debate, and it's not the first time that we've had the debate. Each of the member states have taken steps forward towards convergence. We have to start by identifying our shared interests that we want to defend and what instruments we're willing to deploy to defend them. The microchips question is just one of them, but the major issue is to work to reduce our dependency. We are an economic and trade power. We are a commercial actor, and we see that we are too dependent in some areas on other parts of the world. That is the case with regard to China. The Commission has made proposals which are under debate amongst Member States and the European Parliament in order to progressively reduce our dependence in a thoroughly strategic area. This also shows why it's important to have links and relationships with our partners and allies. Recently we had a summit with Canada. We also met the USA. Microchips and microprocessors are important for them too. That was at the heart of our discussions with those partners in order to have a strong dialogue with our partners and allies on this sort of subject. The strategic compass is set to be a document which will help us to take decisions, to find the right orientation and the right instruments and tools that we should put into practice in order to defend our interests.
That was for me. So all commissioners of the College of Commissioners have my full confidence. Serbia has come a long way, but of course there's still a lot to do, also on the issue of rule of law. This was also content of my talks with President Vučić and Prime Minister Brnabić. last week in Serbia itself. And of course, they acknowledge that there's still work to do. And as you know, in a regular process, the services and the Director Generals, the DGs of the Commission with their experts, with a lot of experience since years, not to say decades, are reporting on a regular basis on the progress of the individual country that is in an accession process.
We'll take one last question remotely. Angela Mauro. Angela, are you still with us?
Yes. Yes, thank you, Barry. Good afternoon to everybody. I have two quick questions for the three presidents. The first one is, do you think the Russian authorities are responsible for the rising of energy prices as Gazprom is cutting the deliveries, the exports outside Russia? And the second question is maybe it's more for the President of the Commission. As far as I understand, there is no agreement among member states on the idea of common storage. Can we assume that in the communication you will be presenting next week, this idea will be maybe taken into consideration, but we will wait the debate at the European Council in October, in 2 weeks' time, and so the communication will have mostly national measures or suggestions for national measures. Thank you.
Yeah, on the first question, I would like to be careful because we would like to assess what's the exact situation, and based on the first elements, we think that there are different elements that are playing a role and that are influencing the price of gas. Certainly, the long winter in some regions. A certain point, the increase of the demands of gas in China, a certain element, some technical problems in Norway and probably also in Russia, and also one of the elements that you have mentioned, the level of production of gas in Russia. This is probably one of those elements. But we need to have a look at the global picture, and that's why we thought, based on the first talks we had yesterday evening, this is good to prepare very well this debate with the expertise of the Commission. It will be provided to the Member States, and so we will have a clear picture, and based on the clear picture, I hope we'll be able to see what can be done at the national level, and this will be the responsibility of the Member States to act at the national level, and we'll see also if it's possible and if it is appropriate to act at the European level based on the work that will be prepared by the Commission.
Very briefly on that too, we are preparing now the communication, and of course the question of storage will be part of the communication, but detailed out next week. And what the first part of your question is concerned, indeed we need to have the full numbers and the full picture. The one thing I observe is that Norway, one of our suppliers, is now stepping up and increasing the supply, and I think this is a very good example. Others could follow.
Thank you to all. All language versions of the Brdo Declaration are online now. Thank you for joining us, and see you soon. Madam President.